A little boy spit on her shoes. Right there, in front of everyone, in the marble foyer of the most dangerous house in Seoul. He looked up at her with eyes that had seen too much for a 5-year-old and said, "Leave. They all leave anyway." Adeze didn't flinch. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She just looked down at her ruined shoes, the only good pair she owned, then back at the child and said quietly, "I'm not them." That was the beginning of everything. 3 days earlier, Adeze Okafor had been sitting in a government office in Lagos, staring at a deportation notice that had no business existing. She had done everything right, studied, worked 2 jobs, sent money home every month, raised her younger sister across 3 time zones with phone calls and prayer. And now, after 6 years of building a life in South Korea, a clerical error, a bureaucratic mistake that wasn't even hers, had unraveled everything in a single stamped envelope. She had 30 days to find legal employment with residential sponsorship, or she was going back to Lagos with nothing but the shame of failure wrapped around her like a coat. She was 31 years old. She had no husband, no savings left after her mother's surgery, no backup plan. And then her friend Priya, who worked in a staffing agency, called her at midnight. "I have something," Priya said, "but I need you to listen before you say no." Adeze already knew she was going to say yes. Desperation has a way of making yes the only word left in your vocabulary. Private household, live-in domestic position, full residential sponsorship, legal work visa, accommodation, food. Who is the family? Priya went quiet for just a second too long. Priya? The Kwon family. The line felt like it got heavier. Every foreigner who had lived in Seoul for more than 2 years knew that name. Kwon Minho, founder of Kwon Industries, pharmaceuticals, real estate, shipping. On paper, a business empire. In the streets, a different kind of empire entirely. The kind with bodyguards who never smiled and cars with blacked-out windows. The kind where people who asked too many questions stopped asking questions altogether. "I'm not cleaning for a crime lord," Adeze said. "You're not cleaning for him," Priya said. "You're caring for his son. His 5-year-old son, Soo Hyun. The boy has had 7 domestic workers in 18 months. Every single one of them quit. Some quit the same day they arrived. Why? The child is difficult." Adeze thought about the deportation notice sitting on her kitchen table. "What's the salary?" The Kwon estate sat behind walls that didn't look like walls. They looked like art installations, sleek black panels threaded with security cameras so discreet you'd never notice them unless you were looking. The house itself was a masterpiece of cold architecture, glass and steel, angles, no warmth, no softness. She knew something was different about this place the moment the car turned into the private road. There were men at the gate, 2 of them, not in uniforms, in suits. But the way they stood, weight forward, hands loose at their sides, scanning the car before waving it through, that was not how security guards at a business estate stood. That was how men who had done things stood. Permanent things. Irreversible things. One of them met her eyes through the window as the car passed. She did not look away first. Inside the main foyer, a phone call was happening in an adjacent room. She could hear it through the partially open door. Minho's voice, lower and harder than it would ever be in her presence, speaking in rapid Korean. She couldn't catch every word, but she caught enough. A name, a number. And then, very calmly, with absolutely no emotion, the words that made the housekeeper beside her visibly straighten her spine and look straight ahead. Make sure they understand this is not a request." The door clicked shut. Mrs. Yoon, the head housekeeper, a tiny woman in her 60s with the energy of someone who had survived wars by being organized, appeared at her elbow and said, with remarkable composure, "Mr. Kwon will be with you shortly. This way, please." Adeze followed her. She made a quiet note to herself. This was not a complicated household. This was a dangerous one. And the only reason she did not turn around and walk back to that gate was that the deportation notice was sitting on her kitchen table, and somewhere upstairs, a 5-year-old boy had already broken 7 people without meaning to. She was not going to be the 8th. Kwon Minho appeared at the top of a staircase, and Adeze felt the air in the room shift. He was tall for a Korean man, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit at 11 in the morning, like a man who wore armor even at home. His face was, she searched for the word, controlled, as if every muscle in it had been trained to reveal nothing. He looked at her the way someone looks at a piece of furniture they're not sure they need. "You were told the conditions?" he said. Not a greeting, a confirmation. "Yes," she said. 7 before you. All quit." "I heard." He studied her for another moment. "Why won't you?" It was a fair question. Adeze met his eyes, dark, utterly unreadable, and said, "Because I need this job more than I'm afraid of a 5-year-old." Something moved across his face. Not quite a smile, more like a recalibration. "We'll see," he said. He turned and walked away. Soo-hyun was sitting in the middle of his bedroom floor when Adeze knocked and entered. He was surrounded by expensive toys he clearly didn't play with. Robots, remote-controlled cars, a drone still in its box. And he was drawing something with a single black crayon on white paper. He didn't look up. Adeze didn't announce herself, didn't crouch down to his level with the exaggerated warmth she'd seen other caregivers perform. She just walked to the window, looked out at the garden below, and said conversationally, "The trees here look sad, like they were planted too far apart to talk to each other." Silence. She turned. The boy was looking at her now, suspicious, assessing. "Trees don't talk," he said. "How do you know?" He frowned. "Because they're trees." Have you ever stood very still in a forest? Really still? For a long time? A beat. No? Then you don't know yet. She sat on the edge of his bed. "What are you drawing?" He looked down at the paper, then quickly flipped it over. "Nothing." She saw it before he flipped it. Just a glimpse. A woman's figure. Stick arms. Long hair. A child beside her holding her hand. She didn't say anything about that. "Okay," she said. "Are you hungry?" That's when he stood up, walked across the room, and spit on her shoes. Stay with me, because what happens next is the part nobody expected, including Kwon Minho himself. That night, Adeze was in the kitchen when she heard small footsteps in the corridor. She didn't turn around. She kept cutting the mango the way her mother had taught her. Slow, deliberate, the knife following the curve of the seed. The footsteps stopped in the doorway. She cut another slice. "What is that smell?" said a small voice. "Mango, cardamom, a little ginger." Silence. "It smells like..." The boy stopped himself. "Like what?" No answer. Adeze put a small bowl on the counter without looking back. "You can have some, or not. I'm not your mother." She paused. "I'm just the person who's here right now." She heard him cross the kitchen. She heard the scrape of a stool. She heard him eat. She kept her back to him the whole time because she understood, in that instinctive way that only certain people understand children, that he needed to feel like he'd made the choice himself. When she finally turned around, the bowl was empty and he was gone. She smiled at the empty bowl. It was a start. 3 weeks in, Adeze was starting to map the architecture of this house's pain. Minho left before dawn every morning. He came back after 10 at night. He ate alone in his office. He never raised his voice. He never lost his temper. He was, as far as Adeze could observe, perfectly, terrifyingly controlled. But she noticed things. He always paused outside Soo-hyun's door at night, never went in, just stood there, one hand raised, never knocked. She noticed how he kept a photograph face down on his desk. She noticed how every woman in the household, Mrs. Yoon, the cleaner, the day cook, kept a carefully managed distance from him. Not from fear exactly. More like they had all silently agreed not to disturb something that was fragile under the surface. She noticed how Soo-hyun, every single morning, sat at the breakfast table looking at the chair across from him. The empty chair. Not his father's chair. That was at the head of the table. This was the chair beside the window. The one where the morning light came in warmest. She started sitting there. The first day she did it, Soo-hyun went rigid. "That's not your chair," he said. "Which chair is mine?" He pointed to the far end of the table, the staff chair, the one with its back against the wall. Adeze nodded slowly. "Okay." She got up, moved to the staff chair, sat down. They ate in silence. The next morning she sat in the middle chair again. "I said that's not your chair," he said. "I know. I forgot." She didn't look sorry. He glared. She ate her eggs. By the end of the second week, he stopped saying anything about the chair. By the third week, he was pulling it out for her before she sat down. She didn't make a big deal of it. She just said, "Thank you, Soo-hyun," and sat down, and poured him his morning juice, and asked him what he dreamt about, and when he said, "Nothing," she said, "That's okay. I dreamt about goats last night." And he said, "Goats?" And she said, "Big ones, very rude, very opinionated goats." And he laughed. It was the first time she'd heard him laugh. It sounded like something coming back from a long way away. Minho heard it from the corridor. He'd come down early that morning, unusual for him. He was on his way to his office when the sound stopped him cold. It wasn't loud. It was small, fragile, but unmistakable. His son was laughing. He stood in the corridor and pressed his back to the wall and closed his eyes. He hadn't heard that sound in 16 months. He stood there until he was certain his face was composed again, and then he walked away because Kwon Min-ho did not know what to do with things that made his chest hurt like that. The first time Min-ho actually spoke to Adeze, not commands, not logistics, but actually spoke, was a Tuesday night. She was still in the kitchen at nearly midnight, on the phone with her sister back in Lagos. The conversation was quiet in Igbo, and she didn't hear him come in. She was saying, "I know, Nay, I know it's hard, but I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere, you hear me? I'm not going anywhere." She turned around and found him standing by the refrigerator with a glass of water, clearly having overheard. She switched to English immediately. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't realize. Don't apologize." He said it without looking at her. He put the glass down, leaned against the counter. He looked like a man who had come down for water and wasn't quite ready to go back upstairs yet. "Your family?" "My sister, She's 17, living with my aunt. He nodded, said nothing for a moment. You send money home? Every month. And still you took a job with a family like… He stopped. Like yours? She said carefully. He looked at her then, direct, measuring. You're not afraid of me. Should I be? A long pause. Most people are, he said. I'm from Onitsha, she said simply. I've seen scarier things than a man in a nice suit. Something shifted in his jaw, not quite a smile, but the closest thing she'd seen yet. Soo-hyun was laughing this morning, he said. He thinks my goat dream was funny. He hasn't laughed since… He stopped again, put the glass in the sink, pulled himself back, whatever door had opened, closing. Get some sleep. He left. Adeze stood in the kitchen for a long moment, looking at where he'd been standing. Whatever was broken in this house, she was beginning to understand its shape. She found the photo on a Sunday. She wasn't snooping, she was cleaning the study. Minho had gone out, Soo-hyun was at a supervised playdate, and the frame had fallen from the desk during the week and slid behind the leg of a cabinet. She picked it up, and before she could stop herself, she'd already seen it. A woman, Korean, extraordinarily beautiful in a fragile way, like something made of very thin glass. She was holding a newborn. Minho was beside her, and he looked, Adeze stared, young. Not younger in age, but younger in face, open, unguarded. His hand was on the woman's shoulder, and he was looking at his son, and he was smiling in a way that had never once appeared on the face of the man currently living in this house. She turned the frame face down and put it back exactly where it had been. She finished cleaning. She went to her room and called Priya. What happened to Soo-hyun's mother? She asked. Priya hesitated. Priya, I need to know. For the boy. A long exhale. 18 months ago, she left. Took nothing. Just walked out. No note, no call, nothing. Another pause. There were rumours she'd been unhappy for a long time, that the marriage was… that his world was too much for her, that she was afraid. Adeze closed her eyes. Does Soo-hyun know? He knows she's gone. He doesn't know why. His father told him she had to go somewhere far away, like a trip. That's… Adeze pressed her fingers to her forehead. That's why he said they all leave. What? Nothing. Thank you, Priya. She hung up, and for the first time since arriving at this house, she let herself feel the full weight of what she had walked into. Not a difficult child, a devastated one. Not a cold man, a shattered one. A boy who watched his mother disappear and was handed a rotating parade of women he was supposed to trust and destroyed each one before she could destroy him first. She sat with that for a long time. Then she got up, went to the kitchen, and started making jollof rice, because her mother had always said that when the heart is heavy, feed someone. The smell reached Soo-hyun before he even got through the front door. He stopped in the hallway, nose in the air like a small animal. Mrs. Yoon, who had brought him back from the playdate, watched him with quiet surprise. He followed the smell to the kitchen. Adeze had her back to the door, stirring. The kitchen was warm and red and full of something that smelled like a completely different world. What is that? Soo-hyun said. Jollof rice, Nigerian. You want to try? What if I don't like it? Then you don't like it, and we never speak of it again. He climbed onto the stool. Okay. She gave him a small bowl. He took one careful bite. His expression went through approximately 14 things in 3 seconds. It's spicy. Yes. It's really spicy. Yes. Can I have more? She laughed, and he laughed, and the kitchen was warm. They were still there, 2 bowls later when Minho came home early. He stopped in the kitchen doorway the same way Soo Hyun had, arrested by the smell, by the warmth, by the extraordinary sight of his son sitting at the counter, talking animatedly with the new maid about whether goats were smarter than dogs. Soo Hyun saw him first and went quiet. But he didn't do what he usually did, which was slide off the stool and disappear. He stayed. He looked at his father and said, "Appa, she made spicy rice. It's really spicy, but it's also really good." Minho looked at his son, then at Adeze. She was watching him with that calm, unreadable expression she'd been wearing since the first day, not asking for anything. He sat down. She put a bowl in front of him without comment. He ate. After a moment, without looking up, he said, "It's good." "Thank you," she said. Soo Hyun looked between them with the cautious wonder of a child watching something impossible begin to become possible. Things shifted after that. Slowly. The way seasons shift. You don't notice it until one day you realize everything looks different. Minho started coming home earlier. Not dramatically early, an hour, sometimes 2, but in a house that had held its breath every night until midnight, an hour felt like a revolution. He started eating dinner with Soo Hyun. Not with Adeze. She always set the table for 2 and disappeared. But she would hear them through the door. First, silence. Then small sounds of conversation. Then once, unmistakably, the sound of Minho's voice doing something she had never heard it do. He was reading aloud. She pressed her hand flat against the corridor wall and stood there listening to this man, this terrifying, immovable man, reading a children's book in a voice stripped of everything except gentleness. She made herself walk away. She was not supposed to feel things about him. She was the maid. She was the employee. She was the woman who needed this visa. That was the full extent of the story she was allowed to tell about herself in this house. But Kwon Minho was making it increasingly difficult to stay in that story. One night, 3 months in, she was in the garden after Soo Hyun was asleep. She did this sometimes. Came out in the dark just to hear something that wasn't architecture. To feel the air that wasn't controlled and climate regulated. She heard the door behind her. She knew from the footsteps who it was. Minho stood a few feet away from her, looking at the same black sky. "You can't sleep," she said. "Never," he said. She believed him. He looked like a man who'd made peace with sleeplessness the way some people make peace with a scar. Not healed, just incorporated. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "No." She almost smiled. "How long have you been telling him she went on a trip?" The silence was enormous. He didn't answer for so long that she thought he wasn't going to. Then, quietly, "How did you know?" "He asked me today if I'd ever taken a very long trip. He said his mother took one and never came back, and he wanted to know if that could happen to me too." Minho's jaw moved. "What did you tell him?" he said, and his voice was careful, like a man walking across ice, testing each step. "I told him that some trips happen because people are hurting," she said. "And that sometimes, when people are hurting, they make choices that seem impossible to understand from the outside, but that it doesn't mean they stopped loving the people they left behind. It just means they were very broken." A long pause. "And he said?" "He said, but she could have taken me with her if she was hurting. I could have helped." Minho turned away. She watched his back. She watched the way his shoulders held a weight she couldn't name. "He's not wrong," Minho said, very quietly. "She was hurting, for a long time. And I didn't—" He stopped. "You didn't see it?" "I saw it," he said. "I just didn't know what to do with it. I know how to control things. I know how to protect things. But feelings," he exhaled. "Feelings move differently. They don't follow structure." Adeze said nothing. She just stood beside him in the dark. "He's asking about her more," Minho said finally. "Soo-hyun. He never used to. Now he asks." "That's a good thing." "Is it?" "It means he's starting to trust that he won't break if he asks, that someone will answer him without disappearing." Minho looked at her. In the dark, his face was harder to control. She could see something in it. Not quite raw, but real. "Why are you like this?" He seemed to wrestle with the question. Honest, unafraid. "You say things that other people spend years avoiding." "Because I grew up with a mother who said that swallowing the truth too long gives you a different kind of sickness." She looked at him. "And because somebody has to say it to you. And everyone in your life is too scared to be that person." He stared at her. Then, very quietly, "You should be scared." "Maybe," she said. "Good night, Mr. Kwon." She went inside. She didn't see the way he stood in the garden for a long time after, with the expression of a man who has forgotten what it feels like to be known. Now pay close attention, because this is where the story turns dark. Her name was Yoon So-ra. She arrived on a Thursday, unannounced, in a white car with two men who carried her bags and kept their eyes moving the way Adeze had learned to recognize. Not like security guards, but like weapons waiting for instruction. She was beautiful, polished in the way of women who have been told their whole lives that beauty is currency and have invested wisely. She stood in the foyer and looked around the house with proprietary eyes, and when Adeze came to greet her, she looked at her with the particular coldness of a woman who has decided in advance that someone isn't worth her time. "Who are you?" she said. "Adeze Okafor, the domestic caregiver." "Get my bags to the guest suite, and tell Minho I'm here." Adeze didn't move immediately. "I'll let Mr. Kwon know you've arrived. The guest rooms are on the second floor, left corridor. Your—" She looked at the two men. "Associates can manage the luggage." The woman's eyes narrowed, unused to being redirected. Adeze found Minho in his study. "A woman named Yoon So-ra is in the foyer. She seems to be expecting you." She saw it. A shift. Not exactly surprise, something more complicated. An old tension settling into his face. "I'll be right down." Adeze left. In the corridor, she nearly walked into Soo-hyun, who had crept down from upstairs. He was pressed against the wall, looking toward the foyer. "Soo-hyun," she said softly. "Come, let's go back upstairs." "Who is that?" he whispered. "A guest." "She looks like—" He stopped. "Like who?" she asked gently. "Like the kind of lady that always wants to talk to Appa, and then he gets quiet after." She took his hand. "Come on, you can help me make hot chocolate." He let her lead him away, but he kept looking back. So-ra stayed for a week. In that week, Adeze learned several things. The woman had been in Minho's life for years. Peripheral, strategic, always there in the way that people who want something are always there. She was connected to his business world. Connected, Adeze began to suspect, to the part of his world that operated in shadow. The two men she'd arrived with never left the property. They ate in the staff area without speaking. One of them, the taller one, watched every room he entered with the calm, systematic attention of a man cataloguing exits. She learned something else on the fourth night. She was passing the corridor outside the east sitting room when she heard Sora on the phone, her voice low and fast, and stripped of the performance she wore in company. Adeze stopped. She shouldn't have, but she did. The Busan shipment is already delayed. If Minho doesn't consolidate the partnership by the end of the month, our people will move without him. A pause. I don't care about the boy. The boy is not part of this equation. Another pause, impatient. Then make him part of the equation. Switzerland was your idea. Use it. Adeze walked away. She sat in her room with the door closed and thought very carefully. Sora was not just a woman who wanted Minho. She was a woman who wanted something from him. And Soo-hyun, this small, scarred, slowly healing boy, was a complication standing in the way of whatever arrangement she was trying to broker. That changed everything. She was in the garden the following Sunday, trimming the lower shrubs, when she heard Sora's voice again from the other side of the hedge. On the phone, at ease, unaware. The Nigerian girl, yes, she's become a problem. A pause. Soo-hyun is attached to her. Minho is… I don't know what he is, but she needs to go. Adeze's scissors stopped. Her visa sponsorship runs through the household. If the household terminates her contract, she has 14 days. A pause, and a sound that might have been a light laugh. I've already spoken to someone. The sponsorship paperwork has an anomaly we can use. It won't even look deliberate. Silence. Yes, once she's gone, the boy will need to be redirected. Switzerland was always the better option. Minho just needs to be steered properly. And once this Busan deal closes, he won't have the energy or the reason to fight it. The call ended. Adeze sat very still among the hedges for a long time. She understood now, the full shape of it. This wasn't about jealousy. This was architecture. Sora was systematically clearing every person who gave Minho a reason to stay present, stay human, stay anchored to something outside of the business world. She needed him locked inside. Remove the woman, relocate the child. And Kwon Minho, already broken, already isolated, would have nothing left to hold on to except the world Sora was offering. She thought about 14 days. She thought about Lagos. She thought about her sister and her mother's medical debt and the 6 years she'd spent building something from nothing. She thought about a small boy climbing into her bed after nightmares, saying Ada, like it was a word that meant safe. She thought about a man in a garden saying, quietly, feelings move differently. They don't follow structure. And then she made a decision. Not the safe one, the right one. She went to Minho's study. She knocked. Come in. She opened the door. He was at his desk. He looked up and she could tell from his face he'd been somewhere dark. Adeze. It was the first time he'd used her name. I need to tell you something, she said. And I need you to hear it before you respond. Can you do that? He studied her. Nodded. She told him everything she'd heard. Both conversations. The Busan shipment, the Switzerland plan, the visa paperwork, all of it. She told him the way she always told things. Plainly, without drama, without pleading. Just the facts, the words, the plan. When she was done, the room was very still. Minho's face had done something she'd never seen it do. It wasn't anger. Anger would have been simpler. This was something colder and far more precise. The expression of a man who has just understood exactly what has been happening around him while he wasn't paying attention, and who has decided what comes next. "You're sure of what you heard?" he said. "Yes." He stood up slowly, walked to the window, looked out with the stillness of something deciding. "Why are you telling me this?" he said finally. "If she already has access to your visa paperwork, telling me puts you directly in her path. She'll know it came from you." "I know." "You could have said nothing, left quietly when the time came." "I know." "Then why?" She held his gaze. "Because your son is more important than my visa. And because you deserve to know who is in your house." He looked at her for a long moment with an expression that lived somewhere between something breaking and something being built. Then, "Get Soo-hyun. Keep him with you tonight. Don't let him out of your sight." "What are you going to do?" He turned from the window. His face had closed again, fully, professionally, but his eyes held something she hadn't seen in them before. Certainty. And something that looked, distantly, like relief. "What I do," he said. "Make problems go away." What happened next, Adeze did not witness directly, but the house told her everything. At 9 that evening, Seo-ra was summoned to Min-ho's study. The meeting lasted 11 minutes. Adeze knew because she was in Soo-hyun's room reading to him, and she counted. She heard nothing. The walls in that house were built for silence. But at 9:12, she heard footsteps in the corridor, measured, unhurried. Min-ho's footsteps, returning to his office. And beneath them, faster, uneven, the sound of heels that had lost their composure. She heard Seo-ra's voice, once sharp and tight. "You don't understand what you're walking away from." And Min-ho's voice, even and absolutely final. "I understand exactly what I'm walking away from. That's the point. Good night, Seo-ra." A door closed. The house went quiet. Later, Mrs. Yoon appeared in the doorway of Soo-hyun's room with the expression of a woman who has watched something long overdue finally happen. "She's leaving in the morning," Mrs. Yoon said simply. Adeze nodded. "Also," Mrs. Yoon added, with the quietest possible satisfaction, "Mr. Kwon would like you to know that your sponsorship paperwork has been transferred to his legal team tonight. It will be corrected and secured by morning. Permanently." She disappeared. Adeze looked down at Soo-hyun, who had fallen asleep mid-sentence in the story, his mouth slightly open, his small fist curled beside his face. She let out a breath she had been holding for days. By breakfast, Seo-ra was gone. No scene, no dramatic exit that anyone witnessed. Just gone. The white car absent. The guest suite already being reset by the cleaning staff with the quiet efficiency of people experienced at erasing evidence of unpleasant visits. Min-ho appeared at the breakfast table. For the first time, he sat down in the middle, not at the head, beside Soo-hyun. The boy looked at him, looked at Adeze, looked back at his father. "She left," Soo-hyun said. "Yes." "Good," said Soo-hyun. He picked up his spoon. Min-ho looked at Adeze across the table. Just looked for a moment. Then, quietly, meant only for her. "Thank you." She said, "Thank you." They held each other's gaze for 1 second longer than was strictly professional. And then Soo-hyun said, "Ada, can we have the spicy rice again?" And the moment dissolved into the ordinary, beautiful chaos of a morning meal. If this is hitting you somewhere real, stay with me. The part that breaks everything open is still coming. 2 weeks after Seo-ra's departure, something shifted between them. Not dramatically. Nothing so simple as a declaration or a grand gesture. More like the air pressure changed. The way it changes before a season turns. It started on a Wednesday evening. Adeze had been teaching Soo-hyun a counting game she'd learned as a child in Onitsha. Clapping and numbers and a ridiculous rhyme about a market woman. And the boy was laughing so hard he'd slid sideways off the sofa. Minho had come in from work early again, still in his jacket, and stood in the doorway watching with the particular stillness of a man who is trying to memorize something. She looked up and caught him. He didn't look away. "Come and play," Soo-hyun said, grabbing his father's hand without looking, assuming he would comply the way children assume the people they trust will always comply. Minho sat on the floor. On the floor. In his suit. Cross-legged. Adeze showed him the clapping sequence. He was terrible at it. His hands moved with the careful deliberateness of someone who had not played in so long he'd forgotten the muscle memory. He got the rhythm wrong twice. Soo-hyun corrected him with magnificent authority. "No, Appa. Like this. Watch Ada." So Minho watched Ada. She demonstrated. Slow, patient, her hands finding the rhythm easily, naturally. And when she looked up, he wasn't watching her hands. She held his gaze for one quiet beat. "Again," Soo-hyun commanded. They played until the boy's energy finally ran out and he sprawled dramatically across both of them, asleep within minutes with his head on Minho's knee and his feet across Adeze's lap. Neither of them moved to disturb him. The room was quiet in the good way, the way that feels earned rather than empty. "He trusts you completely," Minho said. His voice was low, careful of the sleeping child. "He's a brave boy," she said. "After everything, he's still willing to try." Minho looked down at his son's face. Something on his own face was unguarded in the low evening light. "When I was building the company," he said slowly, "I believed that if I made everything around us hard enough, secure enough, the walls high enough, nothing could touch us. Nothing could hurt us." He paused. "I built the most dangerous walls I could find, and then I was surprised when the people inside them couldn't breathe." She said nothing, just listened. "I have been sitting outside his door every night for 16 months, he said, unable to knock. He looked at her. "You knocked. The first day. You just knocked." "It's a door," she said simply. "For some of us," he said quietly, "it's much harder than that." She looked at him, this powerful, complicated, slowly unfolding man, and she thought, "I understand you. I did not mean to, but I do." What she said was, "You should knock tomorrow." "What if he doesn't want?" "He will." Minho nodded, slowly, as though filing the instruction away in a place he intended to keep. "Adeze," he said. "Yes?" "I know this is—" He stopped, tried again. "I know what your position here is, and I know what mine is, and I would not want you to feel that anything is—" He stopped again, frustrated with himself in a way she found quietly endearing. "You're not very good at this," she said. He gave her a look. "No." "What are you trying to say?" A pause, then simply, "That I see you, not the position. You." The room held its breath. She looked at this man who controlled empires and couldn't knock on his son's door, who had built walls to protect people and accidentally imprisoned them instead, who was sitting on his own floor in his expensive suit with his sleeping boy across his knee, trying very carefully to say something true. "I see you too," she said. That was all, but it was enough. It was, in fact, everything. The first time Soo-hyun called her mum, he didn't know he'd said it. It was a Saturday, 5 months after Adeze had arrived. They were at a market on the east side of the city. One of those wonderful, chaotic places where everything was loud and colourful and smelled of 20 different things at once. She'd taken to bringing Soo-hyun here on weekends. Minho allowed it, carefully, with a security detail that stayed discreet but present. Soo-hyun was pulling her toward a stall selling small painted wooden animals, chattering about whether the giraffe looked sad or just thinking, and he turned to call back to her and said, completely naturally, completely unaware, "Mom, look, this one looks like it's planning something." He stopped. She stopped. He looked at her with enormous eyes, the colour rushing up to his face. I didn't mean... Soo-hyun. She crouched down in front of him, right there in the middle of the market. Look at me. He looked, mortified, braced for correction. It's okay, she said. You hear me? It is okay. But you're not... I know what I am, she said. And I know what you are. And what you are is mine to look after. As long as I'm here, you are mine to look after. Okay? His chin was doing the thing. The trembling thing. Okay, he whispered. She pulled him in. He wrapped his arms around her neck the way children do. Completely. Without reservation. With the full weight of everything they've been holding. She held him in the middle of the market and felt, with a clarity that almost frightened her, that this was what she'd been walking toward since the moment she chose to say yes to a job she should have been too scared to take. She didn't cry, but it was a near thing. She told Minho that evening. They had developed a habit, she had not noticed exactly when, of sitting in the garden after Soo-hyun was in bed. Not always talking, sometimes just present. Two people who had both learned that silence wasn't always empty. When she told him what happened at the market, his face went very still. What did you say to him? He asked. She told him. He looked at the dark garden for a long time. He asked me something too, Minho said quietly. 2 weeks ago. He looked at me and said, Appa, did Amma leave because of me? Just like that. Eyes open. Waiting. Adese's breath caught. What did you tell him? I told him no. I told him she left because she was in pain, and that her pain had nothing to do with him. That she loved him, and that I was sorry for not seeing her pain sooner. For being the kind of man who built walls instead of opening windows. He paused. I told him I was working on that. You told him that? I did. He glanced at her. You once said that swallowing the truth too long gives you a different kind of sickness. She felt something move in her chest. He cried, Minho said, for a long time, and I held him. I hadn't held him, not properly, since she left. I was afraid that if I touched him, I would break, she said softly. Yes. A long breath. And it was the most useful thing I've done in 16 months. The garden was very quiet. Adese, he said. Yes? He looked at her, and in the dark, with his face unguarded in the way it only ever was in this garden at this hour, he said, You are the first person in a very long time who has made this house feel like somewhere I want to come home to. The air between them felt different. She thought about all the reasons this was complicated, all the distances, cultural, professional, situational, that lay between them. She thought about all of that, and then she said, Then come home to it. Not for me, for him. He looked at her steadily. And if it's also for you? She held his gaze. Then that's okay too. They didn't rush. That was the thing. They were two people who had both been broken by things moving too fast, and so they moved slowly, carefully, like people who understand that the most important things deserve to be approached with patience. But they moved. Minho started coming home like a man who had somewhere to be. He knocked on Soo-hyun's door the next evening. The boy had thrown it open before his knuckles even finished landing, like he'd been waiting just on the other side, which he probably had. He learned to make her mango cardamom dessert, badly at first, then less badly, then well enough that Soo-hyun declared it acceptable, which in his critical young vocabulary was the highest distinction available. He brought her flowers once, not a grand gesture, just one small bunch from a street vendor near his office. He put them on the kitchen counter without comment, and she found them when she came in, and he was already across the room pretending to read something. "Thank you," she said. "They were just there," he said, not looking up. She hid her smile entirely. Not well enough. 6 months after the day at the market, Soo-hyun's school held a Parents' Day. Minho asked Adeze to come. She hesitated. She knew the lines. She knew what she was and what she wasn't, and she'd always respected the difference. He said, "He asked for you specifically. He said, 'Appa, can Ada come? She's the one who knows all my stories.'" She went. She sat beside Minho in small plastic chairs designed for people significantly shorter than either of them, in a room full of Korean parents who looked at them with varying degrees of curiosity, and she searched for the word, right. Not without the awareness of all the complications, but right. Settled. Like her feet were exactly where they were supposed to be. Soo-hyun stood at the front of the class to present his "Something Special About My Family" project. He'd drawn a picture. 3 figures. A tall man in a suit with a straight face but soft eyes. A woman with big hair and a bright dress who was smiling with her whole body. And a small boy standing between them, holding one hand each. Under the picture, in careful, effortful Korean characters, he had written, "This is my family. We are getting better." The classroom was quiet for a moment. The teacher looked at Minho. Minho looked at Adeze. Adeze looked at the drawing. "We are getting better." She pressed her fingers to her lips and breathed. After the event, walking to the car, Soo-hyun between them, the boy suddenly reached up and took both their hands. Naturally, without asking, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Adeze and Minho caught each other's eyes above his head. And Minho, this man who had worn armor to breakfast for years, who had stood in corridors too afraid to knock, who had built walls so high they kept out the weather and the light both. Minho smiled. A real one. Full. Unguarded. She recognized it from the photograph she had found months ago and placed back face down. The one taken the day his son was born. The one where he'd looked like a completely different man. He looked like that man again. It had just taken a long time. And the right kind of patience. And a woman from Onitsha who was not afraid of him. And a small boy who had learned, slowly and painfully and bravely, that asking for things was not the same as losing them. Later, she called her sister. "You sound different," her sister said. "Do I?" "You sound settled, like your feet are on the ground." Adeze stood at the window of her room in this house that had become, quietly, genuinely, a home, and looked out at the garden below. "I think they are," she said. "Tell me everything." She told her. Not every detail, the important things. When she was done, her sister was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Mama would have liked this. She always said the best stories start with someone brave enough to just show up." Adeze closed her eyes. "Yeah," she said softly. She would have. The last thing. 2 months later, on a quiet Saturday morning, Minho came to find her in the garden. He stood for a moment, that old habit of composing himself visible in the set of his shoulders. Then he crossed to where she was sitting and held out a small envelope. Inside was a document. She looked up at him. "Permanent residential status," he said. "Independent. Not tied to the household sponsorship. Not tied to this job. Yours." He paused. "Whatever you choose to do with it." She understood exactly what he meant. She was free. Truly, completely free. No conditions, no leverage. Free to leave if she wanted to. Free to stay if she wanted to. And free people who chose to stay, stayed because they meant it. She looked at the document for a long time. Then she folded it carefully, held it in her lap. "Thank you," she said. "Stop thanking me," he said quietly. "You came into a broken house, and you had the courage to stay in it. You loved my son when he was doing everything he could to make it impossible. You told me the truth when everyone around me had decided it wasn't worth the risk." He paused. "You sat in a garden in the dark and made me feel like a human being again. I don't know how to thank you for that." "Don't," she said. He stopped. "Don't thank me," she said. "And I'll stop thanking you. Let's just be here. Can we do that?" He looked at her, and then he sat down beside her, close, shoulder almost touching shoulder. "Yes," he said. They sat in the garden. The trees, which Adese had once said were planted too far apart to talk to each other, had grown. Their branches now crossed overhead in the wind, touching, holding. And inside the house, somewhere above them, a small boy was building something elaborate out of blocks, narrating to himself in that particular joyful way of children who have been told their stories matter. Loud, confident, alive. Telling himself a story about a family that was getting better. And this time, finally, fully, truly, it was. If this story reached something inside you, share it with someone who needs it. Because somewhere out there is someone sitting in a broken house, afraid to knock. Tell them to knock. It's just a door. And on the other side is everything.